Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the 2-episode premiere, is out right now, and I have watched both episodes twice. I'm doing reviews on both in individual episodes. I've already talked about episode 1, be sure to check that out if you haven't already, and right now I will be talking about episode 2, I Become Supreme Lord of the Bathroom. If you can't already tell, I'm very excited to talk about this one because I am already dressed like my favourite character, Clarisse LaRue. Dior Gudjon, you are an angel. I absolutely adore you. I will be talking about you so much more. But for now, let's dive in to this review of episode 2 of Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Now, like I said in episode 1, I'll be doing a non-spoiler and spoiler version and talking about characters, actors, plot, changes, all that sort of stuff. So to start in the non-spoiler section, I'm only going to be talking about the actors and a little bit of the story. Episode 2 is already an improvement on some of the issues that I had with episode 1 in terms of pacing, and the story is really solid here. I do think this one suffered a little bit more from exposition-related issues, but that's a conversation for the spoiler section. Acting-wise, the main actors that stood out to me in this episode are Dior Gudjon as Clarisse, hence the rep. Dior as Clarisse, oh my god, I am obsessed. She is embodying this badass so well. She makes you want to hate her, but then also, because this is me, I admire her so much. I am repping the Clarisse love. Clarisse is the number one girl. She is the best. She is my everything. And Dior Gudjon, just the rage that she has, the vindictive nature that she has, it comes out so well in Dior's acting. And I don't know if anyone saw the interview, but Walker has this moment where there's a scene where Dior as Clarisse screams in rage, and Walker himself was terrified, and this is how good her acting is. She screams in rage and you feel that scream and you think, oh shit. And just absolute perfection. Alongside Dior, who's also a standout for me, is Leah Jeffries as Annabeth, because wow, Leah is playing the subtleties of Annabeth so freaking well. She's not as much of a feature in this episode, which I do think was a little bit of a letdown because she does feature more in the original story around this section. But the times that she does feature, she is the thing that your attention is on. She is immediately who you are giving attention to in this story, because there is something about her that is just drawing you in, which is the same for Walker's Percy. He is being drawn into, he is intrigued as to what is going on with her, and so are we. She gives this really sort of standoffish but powerful aura. Just her, there's a scene where she's just kind of standing, leaning against something with her arms crossed, and just kind of oh, she's important. She is power. She radiates power. Just kind of standing and just it's not that she's expressionless, but she's giving this sort of image of Annabeth as this sort of person who is just always thinking about the angles, how she can approach something, and her mind is just always worrying. That's the impression you get from Leah's acting, and that is spot on what Annabeth needed to be like, and it's perfection. But these two girls, they stood out so much in this episode. Walker did as well. I think he really kind of came into his own as Percy in this episode. I think there was a mention at some point that he did struggle a little bit initially. You can see him coming into it. We've got the emotional raw power, bit weaker at the start, improves a lot by the end, not just for Walker, just in general for the episode. But he hits the Percy comedy so well in this episode. The sass is spot on. Just immediately there is so much more of an improvement in this episode on so many various different things, including pacing. But like I said, there are some issues. This episode actually featured a few more changes to certain plot elements that some of them make sense, some of them don't. But overall, I think this episode is a huge step up. I think it's got some of the continuing issues from the first episode, but the first 2 episodes, especially for a fantasy show like this, and one that has a lot of information that needs to be provided in a short period of time, they're doing what they need to. These are the ones where you are going to have the most exposition and information provided, because you need to provide it before we get into the main event. It's why I continue to think I think it should have been 10 episodes, because this is like, these 2 episodes are the kind of examples of why it should have been a little bit longer, just for 10 episodes. I think to give that breathing room. But from what I've heard from the critics who got to see it sooner, and also some of my podcasting friends, shout out to them, who saw the 4 episodes, 3 and 4 are where it kind of levels out the issues that you see in the first 2 episodes. But yeah, episode 1 and 2 I think make sense for why they have these pacing related issues, because this is where you have to give the information. But this is all for the non-spoiler section. We're going to get right into it. I have my notes. I am raring to go. So you heard me mention in the non-spoiler section that the emotional beats at the start I don't think are as strong as they could be. And this is specifically the moment where Percy wakes up after losing his mum. Like, his mum has been killed, to his knowledge, that by the Minotaur. And there's a moment where but there's a few different moments where, like, he wakes up and there's Annabeth saying, "You drawl in your sleep." Iconic line, weirdly placed. Didn't really hit as well as I think I wish it had. Leah's delivery, fantastic. Placement was just odd to me. But he wakes up kind of like not suddenly, just kind of drifts awake, and Grover says, "Don't worry, you're safe." And I don't know, I think it may have been the way it was shot as well. I think there should have been a shot of Percy looking towards the Minotaur horn in his face. Like, there wasn't as much emotion behind of him realising, oh, it was all real, oh, my mum is gone. We don't get that emotional weight of that scene. There's a moment where, like, Percy brushes away a tear, but the tear didn't it sounds mean, the tear didn't feel earned in the scene, because it kind of moved really quickly through it. And we feel it a little bit more after he goes to try and find his dad, to try and get answers and figure out. But then we go into the comedy elements, and I feel like that kind of undermines any possible growth in that weighty moment, because we didn't really get much of it. Like, his mum's gone, he doesn't know what to do anymore, but we're not really feeling that. But aside from that, what follows next is absolutely fantastic. I'm not going to be able to say his last name correctly, but Jason, who plays Mr. D, perfection casting. I should have mentioned him in the non-spoiler section as well. But my God, is he Dionysus. That whole scene where Percy's kind of like, "I want to find my dad, can you help me?" And he's like, "Yes, I can, because I am your father." Or just like, "Son." No, what was it he says? It's like, "Yes, I can help you, son." And he's just screwing with him, because if Percy goes to get some wine, then Dionysus can drink said wine, because a demigod has fetched it for him. Which is where they introduce the curse that Dionysus has. Like, he's been punished to be camp director because of something he did. It's a very, very funny scene. Fantastic casting, fantastic moment between the two of them. And I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was really funny, really stood out to me. Great tone in this episode to a degree. There's like the moments of, like I said, like it went from sad to like the sort of comical a little bit too quick to a degree, mainly because we didn't have the chance to focus on the sad. But the comedy in this episode is so much better, and it's so Percy Jackson. I absolutely love it. In terms of, like what I was saying, the information dumping and exposition, it is, I think, a lot more, not intense, but it's a lot more frequent in this episode than it was in the first episode. There are basically multiple exposition dumps throughout this. So we have one from Chiron, who is Mr. Brunner, but we learn is Chiron. I don't think that one was as bad, of him going around and telling Percy all about it, because that kind of makes sense. So I'm kind of fine with that one, but it just added to the list a bit. And then we had various other ones. And most of them came from Luke, which I'm not fully against, because it gives moments for Luke to be friends with Percy and befriend Percy and get close to Percy. That's really important to develop Luke's character, because he is not really developed that well in the books, especially in regards to his relationship with Percy. But there are various different ones. So there is an exposition dump from Luke about nightmares that demigods have, There's an exposition dump about how sometimes you can get the god's attention by doing something that gives you glory, which in this case is capture the flag, which is a new thing, which I thought was a bit weird to be introduced about the concept of glory. There's also a slight exposition dump to do with the forbidden children, so children of the big three. It did need to be there, it did need to be mentioned at some point, but I think it was just slightly weirdly placed, especially the stuff to do with Talia. The one exposition dump that I think was really significant and important was, and wasn't really an exposition dump, was to do with Luke and Annabeth's relationship and how they came to be, and the sibling element, which I'm so glad that they mentioned siblings, because that is a whole thing in the books, which, so I'm glad that's been retconned, so to speak, because it needed to be. But yeah, Luke just has a lot of exposition, which isn't necessarily bad because it gives him chances to interact with Percy, like I said, but it does mean that we don't get the chance to see much of his personality. I was really hoping we would see a sword fighting scene between them. We did not. It was kind of disappointing. And yeah, so there was quite a lot of exposition in this. There were also story changes that, while I don't think necessarily are bad, were odd to me. Grover finds out that Sally Jackson isn't dead because he noticed how she quote-unquote died, wasn't the normal way, and then he spoke to the Cloven Elders, or Cloven Council as they call it, and figured out that no, it means that Hades was taking her instead. Chiron and Mr. D figure that out, and they're like, you can't tell Percy. Of course he eventually does tell Percy, and that ends up being the reason why Percy goes on the quest. Not inherently bad, but also really weird. I'll talk about it in the book spoiler section as well, because there's a specific thing. I'll talk about how it worked in the books, because that does feature a spoiler for the book itself, so I won't talk about it here. But it was just a change that doesn't make sense, because originally in the book for this section, Percy has the idea of going to see if he can bring his mum back from Hades, and that kind of gives a little bit of motivation behind him taking up the quest. I do think it makes sense to make Sally be his motivation for taking on the quest, but I think the way they did it doesn't make sense. Interestingly enough, there is a moment in that scene where we could have hinted at him making the decision, because he says, Chiron says there is a third brother who is jealous of them both, and he says, Hades who's in the underworld. And there's kind of like a pause that comes after. Like, I could almost hear like internal book Percy going, and my mum's in the underworld, maybe I can get it back. And we find out later on, and maybe in the next episode when he talks with Grover about it, that that's why he took the quest, to go find his mum. But by not having him do that because of his own reasons of, I want to get my mum, and have it be that Grover comes in and like, actually your mum's alive and in the underworld, so that's why you need to accept the quest. I know, it just kind of takes a little... I didn't like it as much. Make Sally the reason, yes, because admittedly the reason in the book was not that strong. But don't make it through the influence of others. I think that was what my issue was. I think I mentioned this in the non-spoiler section as well. There isn't as much Annabeth in this episode as I expected. She's very prominent in this part of the book because like she gives Percy the tour. So where Luke is giving the tour, it's Annabeth in the book. But she also has more interactions, like she's teaching him ancient Greek and all these sort of things. They have multiple interactions. She's also there when he goes to see Mr. D in the start. She's in there, and that's actually when she says you drawl in your sleep. Makes a bit more apt. Appropriate, not like, and makes more sense. But she doesn't really feature until the later half of the episode. We have a few moments dotted in of like when he soaks the Ares kids and she's kind of there, and then Luke kind of gives some information about her, and then we have them interacting a bit more during Capture the Flag, and that's kind of it. There's not as many interactions, which is why we'll talk about it later, because I don't want to spoil it for the people who've not read the books. I think she should have been a bit more prominent. But anyway, the things that really stood out to me as really strong elements though is the fight choreography. Oh my god, the fight choreography. They've really nailed this in this episode. I know there's only 2 episodes and we had one fight scene in the previous, 2 technically with Mrs. Dodds, but the Mrs. Dodds one doesn't count. But this showcases how much they focus on working on the fight choreography. And it was spot on. It was, heart racing. Like, you were nervous for Percy. There was so much going on. It was really strong. It was super engaging. The shots for the fight scene itself really worked. It's very dynamic. And just, like I said, when Clarice screams in rage when Percy breaks her spear, you feel it and you are scared. This was the thing for the capture the flag. In the books, Ares have consistently been winning. The Athena, Hermes, etc. have not won in ages, which is why they're kind of like, we need to use Percy. And it's why it's significant that he is used by Annabeth, because she's using him to win because they haven't won in ages. Using him to win when they've already won multiple times didn't feel as strong. Like, in the book for it, when they lose, and Ares has lost, like, they've had a winning streak and now they've lost again because Clarice got distracted by trying to torture Percy. She is angry about her broken spear and angry about losing. It's like a whole thing. I just wanted to mention that because it was a weird change to me. It was quite unnecessary. And it was just kind of like, I don't know, it just felt a bit odd. But in general, fight choreography, fantastic. Capture the flag scenes, amazing. Absolutely loved it. Seeing Percy bored and just like doing, what was it, flossing? I don't even know how to do that. Just like full on just like ADHD kid, just not knowing what to do and just kind of doing various different things and getting really bored. Love it. Fantastic. Amazing. And then his claiming scene. We have this scene with Annabeth where she's kind of like, oh no, I think I've figured something out. She pushes into the water. His wounds heal. He gets claimed. Claim scene, fantastic. Slightly weird was that we had the voiceover of Chiron announcing Percy Jackson and then not seeing the campus response to it fully. I was kind of like, it didn't feel impactful to me. But the scene of it before the voiceover from Chiron, I think really was solid. And then we have the quest related element where we learn that Zeus and Poseidon are fighting. We learn that it's because someone has stolen the Master Bolt. And Zeus thinks it's Percy because Percy is a Poseidon child. And there was like a pact that we learned from Luke that they cannot have kids. So Zeus thinks Poseidon's kid stole it because Poseidon is jealous of him. And if he doesn't return it by the summer solstice in a week, there'll be an all-out war. And Percy's kind of like, no, I'm not going on this quest. I am, my dad doesn't care about me. My mum is gone. I am my mother's son, blah, 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 blah. I want to go into this until he learns that his mum is actually alive or could actually be alive. And then he decides to go on it. And that's how the episode ends. And I don't inherently have anything wrong with this, but I think the beats are just a bit odd to me. I'm going to kind of go now into the book spoiler stuff. So, well, actually no, I'll finish my stuff for the show spoilers. Overall, I think it was a much stronger episode. Pacing, stronger. Exposition, bit of a problem. The dialogue, and I did mention this earlier and I want to focus on, the dialogue didn't, and this is me just like, I've just recently had classes to do with script related dialogue. The dialogue did not feel natural to me for some reason. It didn't feel like a couple of teenagers talking about it. It didn't feel real. It felt very much kind of like, this is the information we need to give, we're writing it how it needs to be said. Like, it didn't, like, specifically with Luke, when Luke has a lot of charm, and he has charming moments throughout. But when he is doing some of the exposition dumps, because it's not written in the way he talks, or at least it's not written in the way it sounds like he should talk. It doesn't feel like there's personality to it. It doesn't feel like there's charm to it. It just feels like he's been given a script, which is not good. And again, this could just be me. I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts on this in the comments. But it's very much something I noticed. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that. But yeah, overall, much stronger episode. Really get into the inciting incident of it. Strong actors in Dior and Leah. And also Walker was also really strong as Percy as well in this episode, though I had some slight weaker moments with some of the emotional beats, but did improve near the end for those. Really love the scene of him burning the blue candy to leave a message to his mum. Oh, fantastic. Also, we'll be talking about that in the book spoiler section, which I'll be getting to now because overall, strong episode. Can't wait to see where it goes because it just seems to be getting stronger each time. It did have its problems, but I'm hoping they'll be solved in the next couple of episodes. Now to the book spoiler section. So, the original way of which Percy learns that his mum is not actually dead is from Ares. After Ares gives them a quest for the water park place. He gives them, a way to get to Las Vegas and also information about his mum. Now, I think that should have stayed, really. I think what really should have happened, like similarly to the books, is Percy thinking if I go to the underworld, I can save my mum. Because there are heroes who've tried to do that before. And then have a conversation in maybe the next episode with Grover being like, can people do it? And Grover's kind of like, oh my god, is that the reason why you took this quest? And have that be the reason why Percy accepts the quest. Not because he's already heard that his mum's alive, but because he's heard it's in the underworld. And have him kind of have a moment of him in the episode, similar to what we do already have, but a little bit longer, maybe it was just like an extra beat of him being like internally, oh, my mum's there. Just like have him have like a thinking face and have that be the motivation. I don't know, I feel like them kind of giving him the motivation and kind of manipulating him a little bit by knowing that he'll do it if he knows his mum's alive feels a bit weird. Especially considering it's coming from Grover. Grover's not manipulative. So it feels really weird that he's manipulating this specifically. But yeah, in the books it's Ares that tells him. And the reason why the reason why he goes for the quest is weak. So it's good that they make Sally the motivation, but they could have done it a better way. Also love that Luke is kind of more prominent in this with his relationship with Percy, considering he is the one who betrays Percy in the end. Building that up a little bit more makes the prophecy work because he is betrayed by a friend. Hence the scene where he is burning offerings to Sally and say, I've made friends, referring to Luke. So it's going to hurt so much more after seeing that scene and then having Luke betray him. Additionally, the reason why I'm kind of a little bit off about Annabeth not being as prominent in this episode is because currently, if she's chosen to go on the quest and we don't have any sort of follow-up, it's going to be really weird because at this point in time he's had more interactions with Luke that would make more sense for him to ask Luke to go on the quest with him alongside Grover. Not Annabeth, because he's not interacted with Annabeth as much. But if we have it that Annabeth is kind of pushing herself onto the quest, that I can do, because that would be hilarious and very Annabeth. But there's various different things where like they've changed things in the plot that aren't inherently bad but are also weird choices that they've made, like the fact that there's also like no hellhound situation, because that kind of leads to more the urgency behind Percy needing to go on the quest, because monsters are getting in when they're not meant to be able to get into Camp Half-Blood, or it's been summoned in or something like that. That is actually the situation. But yeah, I think there's just some moments of changes where it's fine but also weird. Like the whole thing to do with like Talia and the forbidden kids comes from Grover, and weirdly in this episode Grover and Percy only interact at the start and the end of the episode. They do not talk for the rest of it. And it's Grover who has the conversation about forbidden children and the fact that Talia was lost. It makes sense for the initial conversation about Talia to come from Luke, but I don't think he should have gone into as much detail. I think he should have focused more on his and Annabeth and Talia's friendship. And also, we've not had as much resentment from Luke about the gods. That is missing entirely. We don't know how he got his scar. That may be revealed later, but so I'm hoping that is the case. But the resentment is not there. That I think needed to be seeded in from the get-go. I'm hoping we do see it in the next episode at least, but I think we should have seen it in this one. So in general, there is an improvement from episode 1 in terms of pacing, characters, just emotional beats, and just moving the plot forward. But there are also issues in terms of dialogue and exposition and some characterization as well for me, I think. So for this episode, out of 5, I'd probably give this episode a 3.2 out of 5. Just because I think there are areas for improvement, but I've heard that it does improve as the show goes on from the people who were able to see the first 4 episodes, who were friends of mine. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that improves next week and from then on. And of course I'll be doing videos on that as well. But I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Be sure to let me know in the comment section. Try to keep it as spoiler free for future episodes and the books as possible, just for anyone who may be popping in who have not read the books, or put spoiler at the top of your comment if you can. But I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I'm very intrigued, and be sure to subscribe, leave comments, like all that sort of stuff, and thank you so much, and I'll see you all next time.